How's it going, guys? Today I'm going to be talking about anosognosia. This is the tendency to ignore or sometimes deny a deficit in mind or body, which in the case of Ramachandran's chapters, he's talking about paralysis. This is found exclusively in right side damage from a stroke caused by lesions. This also kind of runs in tandem with hemispatial neglect, which is damage to the right parietal lobe, causing events or objects in corresponding visual hemifield, which in this case would be the left side, to be ignored or neglected, even if there isn't any true sensory loss. So in this case, we'd be talking about, individuals with this hemispatial neglect can still see things in that visual hemifield, but they don't attend to them. Although these may be intertwined kind of concepts and intermingled things that occur together, a few things that it doesn't account for is one, individuals' denial of paralysis will persist or can persist after the attention has been brought to the paralysis. So if an individual with this denial is shown kind of concrete evidence that they do in fact have this paralysis, the denial can still persist. Similarly, both neglect and denial can occur independently of one another. The key appears to be kind of rooted in the division of labor between the hemispheres. And to kind of further unpack what these hemispheres do and kind of the conceptual understanding surrounding that, we'll kind of go into the detail of what each hemisphere does. So first, the left hemisphere, and this is in regards to body image and how it adapts and changes. The left hemisphere attempts to preserve a coherent worldview at all costs. It also favors the majority of experience over the minority of one or two instances. So it creates this framework that it bases all of its sensory ability surrounding your body image. And if something doesn't kind of fit into that framework, it either ignores or kind of molds it into fitting into that existing framework. And in contrast, you have the right hemisphere. The right hemisphere questions everything. It looks for inconsistencies in anything that you do or see, and in this case, inconsistencies in your body image and the perception you have of your body. For the right hemisphere to kind of override the left hemisphere, information from these inconsistencies must reach a certain level before a change can be made to the existing framework. In and of this, damage to the right parietal lobe causes the denial related to the body image. And when talking about this hemispherical difference of what they kind of do in this situation, when the right hemisphere is damaged, this allows the left hemisphere to pursue these denials unchecked. So there's no kind of red flag that comes up from the right hemisphere that says, hey, these are inconsistencies that I'm seeing, and let's kind of go back to the framework that we have established for our body image and adjust it accordingly. The root of the problem occurs when we talk about how damage causes the issues with how the brain deals with discrepancies, such as paralysis, in sensory input concerning body image. In the chapters of Ramachandran, we have a couple experiments, or a few experiments that he was talking about, but I'll kind of briefly go over a couple of those so we can kind of unpack what he was kind of going for. One of the examples of experiments that he was talking about is giving individuals with this paralysis a choice of tasks. They were given two options for tasks. They were given a one-handed task, which was the task of threading a light bulb with one hand. They were given a $5 reward for this, or a two-handed task, which was to tie a shoelace on a shoe. They were given $10 for this. Individuals without denial chose the single-handed task every single time because they knew that $5 is better than nothing, and that with their paralysis they were unable to complete the two-handed task. Individuals with denial chose the two-handed task due to the concept of wanting to go for the $10 instead of the $5. Even after being given the opportunity to choose another one, after failures of the two-handed task because of their paralysis, they still continued to choose the two-handed task. And in some cases, some had ascertained and kind of asserted that they had actually completed the two-handed task when in fact they had not. This is an example of reaction formation, which is a subconscious attempt to disguise something threatening to self-esteem by asserting the opposite. So this was kind of to mitigate their attack on their self-esteem by the task not being completed, so they were actually overcompensating by asserting that they had completed the task. The second thing that we're going to talk about is Ramachandran's kind of question about how deep the denial really goes. The experimenters gave individuals with this paralysis a spontaneous motor task to complete, where they were instructed to grab a tray that had cups on it and lift it up and then put it down. Individuals without denial grabbed the tray in the center so as to grab it at its perfect balance point, so that it didn't topple over. Individuals with the denial grabbed the side corresponding to their non-paralyzed limb, expecting that their paralyzed limb would grab the other side to balance it out so that they could pick it up without dropping it. In all cases, they dropped the tray when individuals with denial attempted this task. And upon failure of this task, individuals with the denial actually gave excuses for why they were unable to complete the task, such as shaky hands, sore muscles, etc. And in some cases, individuals actually used that reaction formation and asserted that they had actually completed the task. These kind of illustrate that even when individuals are presented with consequences directly related to their paralysis, the denial can still continue, even so far as to provide excuses, and the brain actually believing that it was in fact completed when it was not. Throughout kind of all the information, Ramachandran had these two kind of dichotomous directions he was going, the Freudian versus the neurological aspects of why this might be occurring. From the Freudian standpoint, he talks about denial, repression, and reaction formation, and on the neurological side, he talks about neglect and the right hemispherical damage. When it comes to the Freudian ideals, this is kind of a behavioral exhibition. They're exhibiting this behavior, which can be observed, but looking deeper, these neurological impacts are possibly at the root of these Freudian kind of conceptual ideas. So obviously behavioral examples of these were present. However, these Freudian ideas occur rooted in the neurological functioning. So Ramachandran, throughout these chapters, kind of determines that there's not one clear-cut direction to look at this, that you have to look at all of these factors to figure out kind of what is the underlying causes of these behaviors, and that there could in fact be this kind of Freudian and neurological dichotomy that is kind of working in tandem with one another for this to be occurring. And that's everything.